The day Cole Matthews boarded Oberon Station with his pet was the beginning of the end. At least that's how it felt to me back then. I should know I was the security officer who greeted him at the docking port. My name is Major Lara Hayes. Everyone calls me Lark. In 2375, I was the chief security officer aboard Oberon Station, the largest multi-species transit hub in the Orion Arm. My job was simple, at least on paper: keep everyone safe, follow protocols, and make sure nothing disrupted the delicate balance of interspecies diplomacy that kept the station running. If you're listening to this report, it means one of two things. Either the Federation Council finally declassified my account of Incident 5479, or civilization, as we know it, has collapsed, and you've stumbled upon this recording in whatever remains of our archives. Either way, you deserve to know what happened. What's still happening, perhaps. The truth about humans and their pets. It started on what we call a soft cycle, our version of a quiet day. Oberon rotated on its axis once every 27 hours, creating an artificial day-night pattern that helped most species maintain their circadian rhythms. During soft cycles, we typically had minimal ship traffic and reduced personnel on duty. Perfect for catching up on administrative work, or in my case, running additional security drills. I was in the central monitoring hub when the notification came through. An unscheduled civilian transport requesting emergency docking clearance. Not entirely unusual shipping lanes, sometimes got disrupted by solar flares or asteroid field shifts, but always worth paying attention to. The ship's registry marked it as Earth-based, which immediately raised my interest. Humans were rare visitors to Oberon. Since Earth's self-imposed isolation, following the nuclear renaissance of 2287, most humans stayed within their solar system. Authorization granted. I set into my comm unit after verifying their credentials. Proceed to Docking Bay 17. Security team will meet you for standard processing. I dispatched Lieutenant Rykov to handle the arrival. Rykov was rigid about procedures, which made him perfect for routine welcomes. 15 minutes later, my comm unit buzzed. Major Hayes, Rykov's voice, came through tight and formal. We need you at Docking Bay 17. Bioscan detected an unidentified life form in the passenger's cargo. I sighed, already anticipating the headache. Classification. Unknown. The system can't categorize it. That was unusual. Our bioscans were programmed with the genetic markers of over 12,000 species from across known space. For something to register as completely unidentified meant either a new discovery or a deliberately engineered organism. Neither possibility was comforting. On my way, I replied, grabbing my sidearm more out of habit than necessity. The corridors of Oberon were a marvel of engineering, wide enough to accommodate species 3 times human size, with adjustable atmospheric chambers and gravity gradients. As I moved from the central hub toward the docking bays, I passed members of at least 6 different species, each nodding or gesturing respectfully. Being human made me something of a curiosity here, but my rank commanded respect regardless of species. Docking Bay 17 was sealed when I arrived, standard procedure, when bioscan anomalies were detected. Rykov stood at attention outside his tall frame, even more rigid than usual. Report, I said, skipping the formalities. 1 passenger human male identifies as Cole Matthews. Claims to be a xenobiologist on sabbatical. His documentation checks out, but he's traveling with an undeclared life form. Rykov handed me a datapad displaying the bioscan results. I scrolled through the initial analysis. The readings were bizarre. The creature apparently possessed characteristics of both vertebrate and invertebrate species, with a cellular structure unlike anything in our database. Where is Matthews now? Inside with his pet. He refuses to let it be taken to quarantine for further analysis. Says it's harmless and protected under the Companion Species Act. I raised an eyebrow. The CSA was an Earth law that had no jurisdiction on Oberon, but humans often invoked Earth regulations as if they applied universally. Let's meet our visitor, I said, authorizing the door to slide open. Cole Matthews sat on a bench in the reception area, a large sealed container beside him. He was surprisingly ordinary-looking mid-30s medium build, with the kind of nondescript features that would blend into any crowd. The only remarkable thing about him was his eyes pale blue and intensely focused. When he saw me enter, he stood up with a smile that didn't quite reach those eyes. "Major Hayes, I presume I apologize for the confusion. I wasn't aware I needed special clearance for Zephyr." "Zephyr?" I asked, nodding toward the container. "My companion. A rare species I've been studying and caring for. Completely harmless, I assure you. Our scans indicate an unidentified life form, Mr. Matthews. Station protocols require all unidentified biological entities to undergo quarantine and analysis before being permitted on board." Matthews shook his head. "With all due respect, Major Zephyr is sensitive to standard quarantine procedures. The stress could harm it. I have all necessary documentation certifying its health and behavioral stability." He handed me a datapad containing impressively official-looking certificates, complete with holographic seals from Earth's xenobiology department. The problem was, I couldn't verify their authenticity without sending a query back to Earth, which would take days. "May I see it?" I asked. Matthews hesitated, then nodded. "Just stay back a bit. Zephyr can be shy around strangers." He knelt beside the container and entered a complex code on its locking mechanism. The top slid open with a soft hiss, and Matthews reached in with a gentleness that seemed genuinely affectionate. What emerged made my breath catch. Zephyr was approximately the size of a terrestrial house cat, but their all resemblance to Earth creatures ended. Its body seemed to shimmer between solid and semi-translucent states, with no clearly defined limbs, just appendages that formed and retreated into its main mass as needed. Its coloration shifted, constantly rippling between deep blues and violets. Most disconcerting were what appeared to be eyes, dozens of tiny iridescent orbs that dotted its surface, blinking independently of one another. "What exactly is it?" I managed to ask, maintaining professional composure despite my instinctive unease. "A symbiotic colony organism from the SETI system," Matthews replied, stroking what I presumed was Zephyr's head. The creature made a soft trilling sound that somehow felt pleased. "Remarkably intelligent and empathetic. They bond deeply with their caregivers." "And its diet?" Rykov asked sharply from behind me. Matthews smiled. "Primarily mineral solutions. It absorbs nutrients through its outer membrane. Completely harmless to any station resources or inhabitants." I studied both Matthews and his unusual pet. Station regulations were clear, but something about the situation felt off. The bioscan had flagged Zephyr as unknown, yet Matthews had documentation classifying it. Either our systems were outdated, or something was being concealed. "Lieutenant Rykov, please escort Mr. Matthews and his companion to temporary holding suite 5. I decided. "Mr. Matthews will need to verify your credentials and run additional analyses on Zephyr. This is standard procedure for any unidentified species." "For how long?" Matthews asked, his tone hardening slightly. 24 hours should be sufficient. The suite is comfortable and you'll have full access to station amenities via comm. Consider it a precaution, not a punishment." Matthews looked like he wanted to object, but then simply nodded and returned Zephyr to its container. As Rykov led them away, I couldn't shake the feeling that Zephyr had been watching me specifically, its many tiny eyes focusing in my direction with an intelligence that seemed far too aware. I returned to the central security hub and initiated a deeper background check on Cole Matthews. His credentials seemed legitimate: xenobiologist with specialization in non-carbon-based life forms employed by Earth's Scientific Council, extensive publications on interspecies ethics. Nothing in his history raised immediate red flags, which somehow made me more suspicious rather than less. I then turned my attention to analyzing the bioscan data on Zephyr. The initial results were frustrating. Our system continuously recalibrated its assessment, unable to place the creature within any known taxonomic category. I sent a sample of the scan to Dr. Marlo Vex, our station's lead xenobiologist, with a request for urgent consultation. Vex's response came faster than expected, his holographic form materializing in my office barely 30 minutes later. The Arcturian scientist's translucent blue features were arranged in what I recognized as their expression of scientific fascination. "Major Hayes, this specimen is remarkable," Vex said, manipulating the 3D bioscan projection between us. "Its cellular structure appears capable of rapid adaptation and mimicry. See these organelles here. They can potentially replicate any biochemical compound they encounter." "Is it dangerous?" I asked, cutting to my primary concern. Vex's head tilted, the Arcturian equivalent of a shrug. "Unknown without further study. Its adaptive capabilities suggest it could potentially generate toxins, but that doesn't mean it would. Many highly adaptive species are completely harmless." "What about its intelligence? The owner claims it's sentient and bonded to him." "The neural activity is unusual," Vex admitted, highlighting a section of the scan. "These patterns suggest a distributed consciousness rather than a centralized brain, more like a network than a hierarchy. I've seen similar structures in collective organisms from the Rigel system, but nothing with this level of integration." I nodded, processing this information. Would standard quarantine procedures pose any actual risk to it, as Matthews claims? "Difficult to say without knowing its specific environmental needs. But based on these readings, it appears remarkably resilient." Vex paused, studying me with his large pupilless eyes. "You're concerned?" "Just being thorough," I replied. "Thank you, Dr. Vex. Please continue analyzing the data and alert me to any new insights." After Vex departed, I decided to personally check on our unusual guests. Temporary Holding Suite 5 was one of our more comfortable containment areas, designed for diplomatic visitors requiring privacy or special environmental conditions. As I approached, I reviewed the surveillance feed on my datapad. Matthews appeared to be working on his own computer terminal, while Zephyr's container sat nearby, its lid now open. I authorized entry and stepped inside. Matthews looked up from his work with mild surprise. "Major Hayes, come to check if we've somehow destroyed your station in the past 2 hours." I ignored his sarcasm. "Just following up. How are you finding the accommodations?" "Adequate," he said, closing his terminal. "Though Zephyr is growing restless. It's not accustomed to confinement after confinement." I glanced at the container. Zephyr was visible, its amorphous body undulating slowly. Something about its movements seemed different from before, more controlled, perhaps more deliberate. "May I observe it more closely?" I asked. "Dr. Vex is quite interested in its biology." Matthews hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, just move slowly." I approached the container, keeping my movements measured. Zephyr's tiny eyes all swiveled toward me, tracking my approach with unsettling coordination. As I drew closer, the creature emitted a soft, melodic sound, almost like singing, but with harmonics beyond normal human hearing range, that made my inner ear tingle uncomfortably. "It's vocalizing?" I asked. "A form of communication," Matthews confirmed. "Primarily vibrational and partially telepathic. It can sense emotional states and responds accordingly." "Telepathic. That hadn't been mentioned in any of his documentation." Matthews shrugged. "In a limited fashion. It forms empathic bonds and can project simple emotional concepts. Nothing as complex as language or thoughts." As if responding to its name in our conversation, Zephyr rippled and extended a pseudopod toward me. The appendage stopped a few centimeters from my hand, hovering expectantly. "It wants to touch you," Matthews said. "It's how it learns." Every security protocol in my training screamed against allowing an unknown organism direct contact, but scientific curiosity warred with caution. "Is it safe?" "Completely. It's just gathering sensory information." Against my better judgment, I extended my hand palm up beneath Zephyr's pseudopod. The creature delicately lowered its appendage until it barely brushed my skin. The sensation was bizarre, like being touched by warm silk that somehow pulsed with subtle electrical currents. For a moment, I felt a strange flicker at the edge of my consciousness, like someone whispering just beyond hearing range. Then, Zephyr withdrew its colors, cycling rapidly through blues and purples, before settling into a calm, lavender hue. "It likes you," Matthews said with apparent surprise. "That's unusual. Zephyr tends to be wary of authority figures." "How can you tell?" "Its coloration. Blue-violet means contentment. If it were distressed or threatened, it would turn reddish." I stepped back, processing this interaction. "Mr. Matthews, I'm curious, how did you come to possess such an unusual companion? Your records show no previous expeditions to the SETI system." A flicker of something annoyance concern crossed his features, before his expression returned to neutral. "I didn't obtain Zephyr directly. It was a gift from a colleague who did the original field research. She knew of my interest in symbiotic organisms and thought we would be compatible. And this colleague's name, Dr. Eleanor Wright. She is currently on an extended research mission in the Tau SETI system. Difficult to reach for verification, I'm afraid." Convenient, I thought, but kept my expression professional. "I see. Well, thank you for your cooperation. I'll return once we've completed our verification processes." As I turned to leave, I noticed Zephyr ripple again, its colors briefly flashing to a deep crimson before returning to purple. Matthews quickly placed his hand on the creature, stroking it in what seemed like a calming gesture. "Just a little startled," he explained. "It responds to sudden movements." I nodded and left, but the image of that flash of red stayed with me. Outside the holding suite, I instructed the security system to maintain continuous monitoring and alert me to any unusual activity or biosign fluctuations. The following 8 hours passed uneventfully. Matthews remained in the suite, alternating between working on his terminal and interacting with Zephyr. The creature seemed calm, occasionally moving around its container, but never attempting to leave it. Our background checks on Matthews continued to come back clean, which only intensified my unease, rather than alleviating it. I was reviewing the latest security logs when the first incident occurred. "Major Hayes to Holding Suite 5, came the urgent voice of Security Officer Tana. "We have a situation." I was there within minutes. Tana stood outside the suite, her posture tense. "Sir, the environmental controls in the suite began malfunctioning about 10 minutes ago. Temperature dropped rapidly, nearly 15 degrees. When maintenance tried to access the control panel, they found it damaged." "Damaged how?" "Melted, sir, like it was exposed to some kind of acid." I frowned. "Where is Matthews now?" "Still inside. Claims he knows nothing about it. Says he was asleep when the temperature dropped." I accessed the door controls and entered the suite. The air inside was notably colder, my breath visible in small clouds. Matthews sat on the edge of his bed looking irritated, rather than concerned. "Major Hayes, come to accuse me of vandalism," he asked. "The environmental control panel has been damaged," I stated simply. "Any explanation?" "None whatsoever. I woke up freezing and found the system malfunctioning." He gestured toward Zephyr's container. "We're both quite uncomfortable." I approached the damaged panel. The metal and polymer surface showed clear signs of corrosive damage with deep pitting in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate rather than random. "Our maintenance team reports evidence of acid damage." "And you immediately suspect my pet based on what evidence?" "Mr. Matthews, we have no evidence yet. We're investigating." I studied the container, where Zephyr undulated slowly. The creature's coloration now seemed muted, almost gray. "Is Zephyr well?" "It looks different." Matthews glanced at his pet with genuine concern. "The cold affects its metabolic processes. It needs stable temperatures." He turned back to me with hardened eyes. "Major, I've cooperated fully, but this situation is becoming untenable. I request immediate clearance to proceed to my quarters on Level 7 as per my original itinerary." I remained professional despite his tone. "That won't be possible until we complete our security assessment, which now includes this incident. In the meantime, I'll arrange for temporary heating and repairs. And how long will that take? A few more hours at most, assuming no further complications. Matthews laughed without humor. You've already decided I'm responsible, haven't you? Or, more specifically, that Zephyr is responsible, despite having no evidence beyond your own xenophobic suspicions. The accusation was calculated to provoke, but I maintained my composure. Mr. Matthews, my concern is station security. Nothing more, nothing less. If Zephyr proves to be exactly what you claim, a harmless companion species, you'll receive my personal apology and expedited clearance. He didn't respond, instead, turning his attention to Zephyr, murmuring soothing words as he adjusted the creature's container. The gesture seemed genuine, the concern of a caretaker for a vulnerable dependent. Yet, something still felt wrong about the entire situation. I left after arranging for portable heating units to be brought in, and a security guard to be stationed outside. Back in my office, I contacted Dr. Vex for an update on his analysis. The results are perplexing. Vex admitted, his holographic form flickering slightly, with agitation. The cellular samples we managed to collect from the air filters show remarkable adaptive properties. They appear capable of producing various compounds, including several highly corrosive substances. So it could have damaged the control panel. Theoretically, yes. But more concerning is this. Vex manipulated the holographic display to show a microscopic view of what appeared to be cells dividing rapidly. These are cells we collected 6 hours apart. The rate of replication is extraordinary, and each generation shows subtle genetic modifications. It's evolving in real time. Adapting would be more accurate. The changes appear targeted rather than random, as if responding to specific environmental stimuli. Vex's expression turned grave. Major, I believe this organism may be far more advanced than Matthews has disclosed. The neural complexity suggests potential for autonomous action, independent of its host's control. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. Recommendation: full quarantine protocols. Isolation in a Class 1 containment field until we better understand its capabilities. I nodded. Prepare the containment unit. I'll inform Matthews personally. I was halfway back to the holding suite when the station-wide alarm activated a piercing, pulsing sound that indicated a biosecurity breach. My comm unit immediately lit up with multiple incoming reports, but Officer Tana's voice cut through first. Major, the creature, it's gone. Matthews claims it must have slipped out when maintenance delivered the heating units, but the surveillance shows nothing leaving the room. Lockdown Level 4 full containment protocols. I ordered breaking into a run. Alert all security personnel to be on lookout for an amorphous, color-changing entity, approximately feline-sized. Approach with extreme caution, no direct contact. By the time I reached the holding suite, chaos had already spread across Level 4. Reports flooded in of environmental malfunctions, communication disruptions, and strange sightings in the ventilation system. Matthews stood in the center of the suite, surrounded by security officers looking simultaneously concerned and defensive. What happened? I demanded, striding into the room. I don't know, he insisted. I was using the refresher station. When I came out, Zephyr's container was open and empty. And you didn't hear anything. The container's locking mechanism is biometrically keyed to you. It must have malfunctioned. Listen, Zephyr is probably just frightened. If you'll let me help search... That won't be necessary, Mr. Matthews. You're being moved to high-security containment until this situation is resolved. I nodded to two officers who moved to flank him. This is no longer about verification of credentials. This is a station-wide security breach. For a moment I thought he might resist, but then his shoulders slumped in apparent resignation. You're making a mistake, Major. Zephyr isn't dangerous, it's scared. And when it's scared, it seeks protection. Protection from what? Matthews met my gaze directly. From those it perceives as threats. Right now, that's you and your security team. Before I could respond, my comm unit buzzed with an emergency alert. Major Hayes, came Dr. Vex's voice, tight with controlled panic. You need to see this immediately. Bioscience Lab Level 3. Take him to containment. I instructed the officers then, headed for the nearest transport tube. The scene in the bioscience lab was unlike anything I had encountered in 15 years of security work. 3 lab technicians were receiving emergency medical treatment, all showing symptoms of severe chemical burns on any exposed skin. Equipment lay in ruins, much of it corroded beyond recognition. And scattered throughout the lab were small, glistening puddles of a viscous, purplish substance that pulsed with an internal rhythm. Dr. Vex stood at the far end of the lab, a containment field generator creating a shimmering barrier between him and what appeared to be a larger mass of the same substance. It divided, Vex said, without preamble as I approached. The samples we collected from the air filters, they were viable cells. They began replicating approximately 20 minutes ago exponentially. When the lab tech attempted to contain them, they coalesced and attacked. I stared at the writhing mass behind the containment field. It was smaller than Zephyr, perhaps the size of a human hand, but its movements held the same deliberate quality. Small, eye-like organelles were beginning to form across its surface. It's growing new eyes, I observed. Not just eyes. Neural clusters, specialized tissues. It's developing a complete autonomic system. And it's not the only one. Vex gestured to the scattered puddles around the lab. Each of those is doing the same, just at different rates. The implications sent a chill through me. You're saying Zephyr can reproduce from discarded cells? I believe so. And each offspring appears to retain some kind of connection to the original organism. They're coordinating their movements, even separated by physical distance. As if to demonstrate this point, several of the smaller puddles began moving simultaneously, flowing across the floor toward the larger mass behind the containment field. They stopped at the edge of the field, probing it with tiny pseudopods. Can the field hold them? I asked. For now, but they're already attempting to generate compounds that might disrupt it. Vex's normally cool scientific demeanor showed cracks of genuine concern. Major, if these smaller fragments can grow into fully autonomous units, and if the original creature has been shedding cells throughout the station. He didn't need to finish the thought. We could potentially be facing dozens, or even hundreds of these creatures, all apparently linked by some kind of collective consciousness. We need to find the original, I said firmly. These offshoots might be connected to it. Neutralize the parent and perhaps the offspring become inert. A logical hypothesis, but... Vex was interrupted by a station-wide power fluctuation, the lights dimming momentarily before emergency systems engaged. My comm unit immediately lit up with reports of similar incidents occurring across multiple levels. Environmental systems, failures, communications disruptions, unexplained equipment, malfunctions, all following the same pattern of corrosive damage we'd seen in the holding suite. It's in the systems, I realized. The central conduits, the ventilation shafts, it's using the station's infrastructure to move and multiply. Which means finding the original may be nearly impossible, Vex concluded grimly. I made a decision. Doctor, continue containing these samples. I need to speak with Matthews again. He knows more than he's telling us. The high-security containment area was located on Level 2, designed to hold the most dangerous individuals who might pass through Oberon. As I approached, I noticed the security monitors were offline, the guard station empty. Drawing my sidearm, I cautiously approached the main door. It was partially open, the locking mechanism showing the same corrosive damage pattern we'd seen elsewhere. Inside, I found 2 security officers unconscious, but alive, both showing symptoms of exposure to a powerful sedative rather than physical injury. Matthew's cell was empty. Security override authorization, Hayes Alpha 7. I spoke into my comm unit. Full station lockdown. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. As the station alert system engaged, I reviewed the last intact security footage from the containment area. The recording showed Matthews sitting calmly in his cell when the lights flickered. Seconds later, a small purplish mass oozed through the ventilation grate, Not Zephyr itself, but one of its offspring. It approached the cell's force field and somehow disrupted it, allowing Matthews to simply walk out. Before leaving, he looked directly at the security camera and smiled. The station lockdown would slow him down, but not stop him if he had Zephyr's fragments helping him navigate. I needed to think like Matthews. What would be his next move? Escape seemed the obvious choice, but how all docking bays would be sealed during lockdown, and no ship could depart without command authorization. Unless he wasn't trying to leave. A cold realization washed over me. The central control hub. With access to those systems, he could override the lockdown open specific docking bays, even disable the station's automated defenses. And if Zephyr's offspring continued to multiply at their current rate, the entire station could be compromised within hours. I headed for the central hub at a dead run, alerting what remained of the security team to converge there as well. The corridors were eerily empty, emergency lighting casting everything in a dim red glow. Twice, I encountered small, pulsing masses of purplish matter which retreated into ventilation shafts at my approach, almost as if they were scouts reporting my position. The doors to the central hub were sealed when I arrived, but signs of corrosive damage around the access panel indicated someone had already attempted entry. 3 security officers joined me, all looking tense but determined. "Plan," Lieutenant Rykov asked tersely. "We go insecure. Matthews contain any of the creatures we encounter. Non-lethal measures if possible. We need him alive to figure out how to stop these things. And if non-lethal doesn't work?" I met his gaze steadily. "Then we do what's necessary to protect the station." I pressed my palm to the emergency override panel, and the doors slid open to reveal a scene of calculated destruction. Several control stations had been damaged, their interfaces melted beyond use. 2 hub technicians lay unconscious at their posts. And at the central command console stood Cole Matthews, calmly working the controls, while what I now recognized as the original Zephyr undulated on the console beside him, larger than before, and pulsing with vibrant colors. "Stand down, Matthews." I called, my weapon trained on him. "Step away from the console." He turned slowly, smiling as if greeting an old friend. "Major Hayes, right on time." "What are you doing?" "Completing my work." He gestured to the console, where I could see he had accessed the station's communication array. "Don't worry, I'm not destroying your precious station. Quite the opposite, I'm using it." "For what?" "Transmission." Matthews stroked Zephyr absently, the creature leaning into his touch like an affectionate pet. "You've been so focused on what Zephyr is that you never asked why I brought it here." Realization dawned. "Oberon has the strongest subspace transmitter in this sector." "Precisely. Capable of sending signals clear across the quadrant." His smile widened. "Signals that contain complete genetic and neural templates." Horror washed over me as I understood. "You're broadcasting Zephyr's pattern, creating more of them elsewhere." "Creating," Matthews laughed. "No, Major. Calling. Zephyr isn't some exotic pet I discovered. It's an advanced scout, a single unit of a much larger collective consciousness. I'm simply letting the rest know where to find us." "Why?" I demanded, keeping my weapon steady, despite my shock. "If these creatures are as dangerous as they appear, why bring them here?" Matthew's expression turned almost pitying. "Because humanity needs them, Major. Earth has become stagnant, isolated, fearful. We need to evolve to adapt, or we'll be left behind as the galaxy moves forward. Zephyr and its kind offer symbiosis, a chance to merge our consciousness with something greater." "You've seen what these things can do," I argued. "The damage, the injuries." "Unfortunate but necessary reactions to perceived threats," Matthews countered. "When accepted willingly, the bonding process is quite beautiful." He rolled up his sleeve to reveal faint, purplish lines, running beneath his skin like veins. I should know. Revulsion and determination warred within me. "It's controlling you." "Enhancing me," he corrected. "And soon it will enhance others. The transmission is almost complete." "Take him down," I ordered the security team. "Non-lethal measures." As the officers moved forward, Zephyr suddenly expanded its body, elongating and separating into multiple tendrils that whipped toward us with frightening speed. One officer went down immediately, a tendril wrapping around his throat. The others fired their stun weapons, but the energy pulses seemed to be absorbed into Zephyr's mass with minimal effect. I aimed more deliberately and fired at the console instead of the creature, destroying the transmission controls. Matthews cried out in something between rage and pain, clutching his head as if experiencing sudden agony. Zephyr's color flashed crimson, its movements becoming more erratic and aggressive. "You've only delayed the inevitable," Matthews gasped. "The signal was strong enough. They'll come. They'll find us." "Maybe," I acknowledged, keeping my weapon trained on him, as Zephyr retreated to his side, seemingly distressed by the destruction of the console. "But not today. Not to this station." I activated my emergency comm channel. "Dr. Vex, status report on containment options." Vex's voice came through steady, despite the chaos I could hear in the background. "We've identified a vulnerability. These organisms require specific oscillating electromagnetic frequencies to maintain their cohesion. Disrupt that frequency, and they begin to destabilize. Can you generate a counter-frequency throughout the station?" "Already working on it. I can use the internal sensor network to deliver it, but I need access to the main environmental controls." I glanced at the damaged console. "Primary systems are down. We'll need to use the auxiliary control room on level 5. "I'll meet you there," Vex confirmed. I turned my attention back to Matthews and Zephyr. The creature had wrapped itself partially around Matthews' torso, its color fluctuating between deep crimson and a sickly gray. Matthews himself looked increasingly unwell, the purplish lines under his skin more pronounced and visibly pulsing. "It's killing you," I observed. "Transforming me," he corrected through gritted teeth. "The process accelerates under stress. Listen to me, Cole. Whatever it's promised you, whatever symbiosis you think you're achieving, look at what's happening. These creatures aren't interested in cooperation. They're parasites using you to gain access to the station, to our systems." "You don't understand," he insisted, though doubt flickered in his eyes. "The collective, it's beautiful. All minds connected, all knowledge shared." "At what cost? Your autonomy, your humanity?" Zephyr pulsed angrily at my words, extending a tendril toward me that stopped just short of striking distance. Its many eyes focused on me with what I could only interpret as hatred. "We need to get to level 5, I told the remaining security officers. "Contain Matthews and the creature if possible, but our priority is reaching the auxiliary control room." "You'll never make it," Matthews said, his voice now overlaid with an odd harmonic, as if another voice spoke simultaneously through his vocal cords. "The station is ours now. Every system, every corridor filled with our children." As if to emphasize his point, the emergency lights flickered ominously. Throughout the hub, small purple masses began emerging from ventilation grates and conduit access points, gathering like a slowly rising tide. I made a tactical decision. "Fall back," I ordered the team. "Secure the corridor to the transport tube." As we retreated, the smaller fragments of Zephyr followed at a measured pace, not rushing, but inexorably advancing. Matthews remained by the ruined console, Zephyr still wrapped around him, both watching our retreat with eerie calm. Once in the corridor, we sealed the doors, but I had no illusions about how long that would hold. New plan. We split up. Rykov take Officer Cade and create a diversion on level 3. Draw as many of these things away from the main transport routes as possible. Officer Jun and I will proceed to level 5. Rykov nodded sharply. "Understood. What kind of diversion?" "Something electromagnetic. Dr. Vex mentioned these creatures are sensitive to certain frequencies. Try the maintenance tools. Plasma cutters emit strong EM fields when active." As Rykov and Cade headed off, June and I took a service ladder to avoid the main transport tubes that might already be compromised. The narrow maintenance shaft was blessedly clear of Zephyr's offspring, though evidence of their passage was visible in corroded handholds and damaged junction boxes. "Major, Jun said quietly as we climbed. If these things can reproduce from just a few cells, and they've been spreading throughout the station. One problem at a time, officer. I cut her off, not wanting to confront the full implications yet. Focus on reaching the auxiliary control room. Level 5 was ominously quiet when we emerged from the maintenance shaft. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down empty corridors, and the usual background hum of station systems was interrupted by occasional power fluctuations. "Stay alert," I whispered, leading the way toward the auxiliary control room. They could be anywhere. We encountered 3 small clusters of Zephyr's offspring, each about the size of a human fist, pulsing with that same internal rhythm. They retreated at our approach, rather than attacking, which somehow concerned me more than aggression would have. It suggested tactics, planning a coordinated response, rather than mindless expansion. The auxiliary control room door was intact when we reached it, showing no signs of tampering. I entered my override code and we slipped inside to find Dr. Vex already there, working furiously at a console. The Arcturian's normally blue complexion had paled to a washed-out gray, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Dr. Vex, status." "Nearly ready," he replied, without looking up from his work. "I've isolated the frequency pattern that maintains their cellular cohesion. The counter-frequency should disrupt it enough to destabilize their neural connections, rendering them inert without complete cellular destruction." "How long?" "Minutes. I need to calibrate the emitters to ensure station-wide coverage without damaging other systems." Vex finally glanced up. "Has Matthews been contained?" "Negative. He's fully compromised, some kind of symbiotic merging with the original organism. And there are hundreds of smaller fragments throughout the station." Vex's expression darkened. "Then we must hurry. My analysis suggests an exponential reproduction rate. If left unchecked, these creatures could completely overrun Oberon within 18 hours. Officer Jun, who had been monitoring the corridor through the security feed, suddenly tensed. Movement outside. Multiple signatures approaching from both directions. I checked the feed. Dozens of purple masses were converging on our position, some flowing along the floor, others clinging to walls and ceiling. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, like a single organism, acting through many bodies. "How much longer, Doctor?" I asked, drawing my weapon. 5 minutes minimum. The calibration must be precise or we risk damaging critical station systems." "We may not have 5 minutes." I turned to Jun. "Seal the ventilation ducts, check all access panels. We need to buy the doctor time." Jun moved quickly, securing potential entry points, while I positioned myself near the door, ready to defend against the inevitable breach attempt. Through the small observation window, I could see the first of Zephyr's offspring, reaching the corridor outside, their many eyes blinking as they examined the door. "They're probing for weaknesses," I observed, testing the seal integrity. "Almost there," Vex muttered, his fingers flying across the console. "The emitter network is accepting the calibration parameters." A soft hissing sound drew my attention to the floor near the door, where a tiny stream of purplish fluid was seeping through an almost microscopic gap in the seal. As I watched, it pooled and began to expand, taking form. "They're already inside," I warned, aiming my weapon at the growing mass. "Doctor, we're out of time." 30 seconds, Vex insisted. "The sequence must complete, or the effect will be temporary." The infiltrating fragment was now the size of a small plate, rippling as it developed those characteristic eye structures. More concerning, it was positioned directly beneath an access panel to the room's environmental controls. I fired at it, the energy beam causing it to momentarily disperse before reforming with apparent irritation. It extended a tendril toward the access panel, beginning to secrete the same corrosive substance we'd seen elsewhere. "Jun, the panel," I shouted. Officer Jun reacted instantly, diving across the room to physically block the creature's access with her body. The tendril lashed at her, making contact with her exposed hand. She cried out, but maintained position, preventing the creature from reaching its target. "Now, Doctor," I urged, watching as more purple masses gathered outside the door. Initiating sequence, Vex announced, activating the final command. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a high-pitched tone just at the edge of human hearing emanated from every speaker and sensor node throughout the room. The effect on Zephyr's offspring was immediate and dramatic. The creature attacking Jun convulsed its form, losing cohesion, as its many eyes blinked rapidly in apparent distress. Outside, the gathered masses displayed similar reactions, their synchronized movements deteriorating into chaotic, spasmodic twitching. "It's working," I breathed, watching, as the creatures began to break down their structures, losing the complex organization that had made them so dangerous. Station-wide effect. "Confirmed," Vex replied, monitoring the system readouts. "The counter-frequency is being transmitted through all environmental sensors. Even areas without direct speaker coverage should experience residual effect through structural vibration." I helped Jun to her feet, examining her injured hand. The skin showed signs of chemical burning, but the damage appeared superficial. "Medical will need to look at that." "I'm fine," she insisted, though her face was tight with pain. "What about Matthews?" That was the critical question. If the original Zephyr was as affected as its offspring, perhaps Matthews could be separated from it, maybe even returned to normal. "Vex, maintain the frequency broadcast. Jun, stay here and assist. I'm going back to the central hub to find Matthews." "Not alone," Jun protested. "That's an order, officer. The doctor needs protection in case any of these things are resistant to the frequency." I left before further objections could be raised, making my way back toward the central hub, via the main corridors, which were now littered with inert purple masses in various states of decomposition. The counter-frequency continued to pulse through the station, its barely audible tone creating an eerie backdrop to the otherwise silent emergency conditions. The central hub doors remained as we had left them, sealed, but showing signs of attempted breach. I entered my override code and prepared myself for whatever might be waiting inside. The scene that greeted me was unexpected. Matthews lay on the floor near the damaged console, convulsing violently. Around him, the original Zephyr had expanded to nearly triple its previous size. Its color, a deep, angry red that pulsed in opposition to the counter-frequency. Unlike its offspring, it appeared to be fighting the effects rather than succumbing to them. "Matthews," I called, approaching cautiously with my weapon ready. "Can you hear me?" His eyes snapped open, revealing pupils, expanded to nearly eliminate the iris with faint, purple veins visible in the sclera. "Major Hayes," he gasped, his voice still carrying that unnatural harmonic quality. "You don't understand what you're doing. I'm saving the station, and you if possible." "No," he choked out as Zephyr wrapped a tendril around his throat. "We are becoming something greater. The next step in human evolution." "That's not evolution," I countered, taking another step closer. "That's subjugation. Whatever Zephyr promised you, look at what it's doing now. It's killing you to preserve itself." Matthew's gaze shifted to the creature, enveloping him, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. "It's just protecting our bond. The transformation isn't complete." "There is no bond, Cole. It's using you. It's been using you from the beginning." I knelt beside him, just out of Zephyr's reach. "Think. How did you first encounter it? Who gave it to you? What evidence do you have that anything it communicated to you was true?" Conflict played across his face as Zephyr's tendrils tightened around him. Blood vessels beneath his skin had turned distinctly purple, creating an intricate pattern across his visible flesh, like an infection spreading through his circulatory system. I don't remember," he admitted, genuine confusion in his voice. "Dr. Wright gave it to me, but I can't remember meeting her. I can't remember a time before Zephyr." "Because those memories threaten its control," I suggested. "The real Cole Matthews might have resisted, so it suppressed those parts of you." Zephyr pulsed angrily, its many eyes fixed on me with unmistakable malevolence. The counter-frequency was clearly causing it distress, but the original organism was stronger, more resilient than its offspring. It maintained its coherence despite the disruption, though its movements had become less fluid, more jerky and desperate. "Help me," Matthews whispered, a moment of clarity breaking through. "It's in my head, Major. I can feel it, changing things, rewriting me." "Fight it, Cole. Push back. It needs your cooperation, your acceptance. Withdraw consent." As Matthews struggled internally, Zephyr's agitation increased. Its color fluctuated wildly between crimson and a deep, murky purple. Several tendrils released Matthews to lash out toward me, forcing me to retreat a step. "The frequency is weakening it," I encouraged Matthews. "But you have to reject it mentally as well. Whatever connection you formed, whatever you believe it's shown, you question it. Deny it." Matthews closed his eyes, his face contorting with effort. "It's showing me terrible things. What will happen if I resist? What will happen to Earth if I fail?" "Lies," I insisted. "Manipulations to maintain control." The struggle continued for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes. Matthews alternated between clarity and confusion, resistance and submission. Zephyr's form became increasingly unstable, parts of it seeming to dissolve, only to reform with visible effort. Then, finally, a turning point. Matthews screamed a raw, primal sound of rejection and liberation. Zephyr's color flashed to a brilliant, angry red, before beginning to fade to a dull, lifeless gray. Its tendrils loosened, withdrawing from Matthews' body, with reluctant slowness. "That's it," I encouraged. "Keep fighting." With a final violent convulsion, Matthews tore himself free from Zephyr's grasp, rolling away from the now rapidly diminishing creature. The purplish lines beneath his skin pulsed painfully, but began to fade, receding toward the points where Zephyr had maintained physical contact. The creature itself contracted into a small, dense ball, its many eyes closing one by one, until only a single large orb remained open, fixed on Matthews, with what I could only interpret as betrayal. Then, with a soft trilling sound that somehow conveyed profound disappointment, that final eye closed, and Zephyr's form lost all cohesion, collapsing into an inert puddle of gray matter. Matthews lay gasping on the floor, his body trembling with aftershocks. I approached, carefully mindful that some trace of Zephyr might still pose a threat. "Cole, are you with me?" He nodded weakly. "I think so. My head. It's quieter now. Empty." His eyes, now returned to normal, held a haunted look. "What have I done, Major?" "That wasn't entirely you," I said, helping him to a sitting position. "Zephyr was influencing your actions, your thoughts." "Not entirely, no. But I let it in. I believed its promises." Matthews looked at the gray mass that had been Zephyr. "It showed me such wonders, Major. A vast network of minds, all connected, all sharing. No loneliness, no isolation. The power to transform entire worlds. At the cost of individuality, of choice." "Yes," he acknowledged quietly. "I see that now. But in the moment it seemed like evolution, not submission." I activated my comm unit. "Haze to security. The central hub is secure. Primary threat has been neutralized. Send a medical team and a containment unit for biomaterial collection." As we waited for the team to arrive, Matthews studied his hands, where the last traces of purple were fading from beneath his skin. "Will I be charged imprisoned?" "That's not for me to decide. But I'll testify that you were under the influence of an unknown alien intelligence. That should count for something." I paused, considering the bigger picture. "What concerns me more is your transmission. You said it got through, at least partially." Matthews closed his eyes, concentrating. "I can't remember clearly. The signal was meant to contain coordinates, and an invitation, a beacon for others of Zephyr's kind. But without the complete transmission, they might not be able to locate us precisely." "Might not" isn't particularly reassuring. "No," he agreed solemnly. "It isn't." The security and medical teams arrived minutes later. As Matthews was taken into medical custody, and the remains of Zephyr secured in a containment field. I remained in the hub, overseeing the initial damage assessment and restoration of critical systems. Dr. Vex joined me hours later, looking exhausted but satisfied. The counter-frequency has been successful station-wide. All fragments have been neutralized with no signs of residual activity or regeneration. And the samples in your lab? Similarly inert. We're preserving them for further study, of course, but under the strictest containment protocols. Vex hesitated, then added, "There is one concerning development, however." "What is it?" "The transmission Matthews initiated. Our analysis shows it was partially completed, perhaps 60% of the intended signal strength and duration. Not enough to convey precise coordinates, but potentially sufficient to indicate a general direction." I nodded grimly. "So they might still come looking?" "Eventually, yes. Though without exact coordinates, the search area would be vast, potentially hundreds of systems." Vex's expression turned thoughtful. "What fascinates me is the evolutionary strategy these creatures employ. Using a seemingly innocuous pet form to infiltrate and establish a foothold before revealing their true nature. It's brilliantly adapted for interspecies contact." "Brilliantly adapted for interspecies parasitism," I corrected. "Let's not romanticize what nearly destroyed the station and everyone on it." "Of course," Vex conceded. "I speak merely from scientific interest." In the days that followed, Oberon Station gradually returned to normal operations. The damage from Zephyr's offspring was extensive, but reparable, and remarkably, there had been no fatalities, only injuries that would heal with time and treatment. Matthews was placed in medical quarantine for observation, his system gradually purging the last traces of Zephyr's cellular influence. His debriefing revealed troubling gaps in his memory, particularly regarding how he first encountered the creature. The name, Dr. Eleanor Wright, appeared to be a fabrication implanted by Zephyr itself, with no records of such a person in Earth's Scientific Council. A week after the incident, I visited Matthews in his quarantine suite. He looked better, the unnatural pallor gone from his skin, his eyes clear and focused. But a haunted quality remained in his expression, the look of someone who had glimpsed something both terrible and wondrous. "They've decided not to press criminal charges," I informed him. "Given the clear evidence of alien influence, you'll be required to undergo psychological evaluation and monitoring, but eventually you should be able to return to your work." "Thank you," he said quietly, "though I'm not sure I deserve such leniency." "You were as much a victim as anyone else on this station." Matthews shook his head. "Not entirely. I remember enough to know that I was receptive to Zephyr's influence, eager even. It found something in me that wanted what it offered. Connection, belonging, purpose, basic human desires that it exploited. Perhaps." He looked at me with sudden intensity. "Major Hayes Lark, there's something you should know. Something I remembered during the neural detox treatments." "What is it?" "Zephyr wasn't the only one. It was part of a larger infiltration strategy. Multiple pets placed with multiple human hosts, scattered throughout Earth colonies and stations." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I wasn't special. I was just one vector among many." The implications chilled me. "Have you reported this to the investigation team?" "Yes, though they seemed skeptical. Without concrete evidence of other infiltrations, it's being treated as a potential hallucination, a side effect of the neural separation." "But you believe it's true." "I know it is. I can still feel echoes, distant impressions of other connections, fading now, but they were real." He met my gaze directly. "They're out there, Lark. Other pets, other hosts. And I don't know if they'll all be as fortunate as I was to have someone help them break free." I left Matthew's quarantine suite with his warning echoing in my mind. The station's security logs were updated alerts, distributed to other Federation outposts, and enhanced bioscan protocols implemented for all incoming vessels. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had glimpsed only the beginning of something far larger and more insidious. In the months that followed, I found myself scrutinizing unusual pets and companions with new wariness. Each exotic creature brought aboard by visiting dignitaries or passengers triggered a moment of instinctive alarm before rational assessment took over. Most were exactly what they appeared to be: harmless companions or status symbols. But the doubt remained a persistent whisper in the back of my mind. What made Zephyr truly terrifying wasn't its physical capabilities, impressive though they were. It was the way it weaponized trust, the bond between pet and owner, transformed into a vehicle for infiltration and control. The most intimate relationship many humans form twisted into something predatory. Matthews eventually left Oberon, returning to Earth for extended rehabilitation and monitoring. Before departing, he gave me a final warning. Watch the quiet ones, Major. The ones that seem to understand too much. The ones whose eyes follow you with too much awareness. I've carried that warning through subsequent assignments, through promotions and transfers, all the way to my current post as security director for the Ceres colony. And in quiet moments, I find myself wondering if Matthews was right, if there are still pets out there biding their time, watching us with those two knowing eyes, waiting for the signal that will never come thanks to our intervention on Oberon. Or perhaps waiting for a new signal from others of their kind who might yet find their way to our corner of the galaxy. I've reviewed the security footage from Oberon thousands of times, studying Zephyr's movements, its reactions, its apparent intelligence. One moment still haunts me, just before Matthews broke free, when Zephyr's many eyes focused on me with what looked unmistakably like recognition. Not the recognition of prey or predator, but of an equal another intelligence acknowledging my presence. In that moment, I understood what Matthews meant about the terrifying beauty of the connection Zephyr offered. I felt it reaching for my mind, offering glimpses of a vast network of consciousness spanning unimaginable distances. The promise of never being alone, never being misunderstood, never fearing death as an absolute end. I rejected it, of course, but sometimes in dreams I still feel the ghost of that touch against my consciousness, a soft, silken pressure, promising wonders beyond human comprehension. And I wonder how many others felt that touch and didn't pull away. So I watch, I wait, and I warn others as I warn you now. The only thing more terrifying than a human is its pet, especially when that pet is watching you back with eyes that understand exactly what you are and exactly how to become a part of you. Because somewhere out there, Zephyr's kind are still waiting, still adapting, still perfecting their approach. And they're very, very patient.